Let's get moving. We are live. We are live. This is Senate Finance. This is Wednesday, May 21st. And we are on the end of this session. Roll for getting bills out of here. We're going to start with H 397. And that relating to miscellaneous amendments to the status governing emergency management and flood response. If Tucker, you're here, you can give us a 2,000 foot until we get to the parts that we have jurisdiction over. I will say I was just sending an email to Representative Borzak because there is a refund for Barry's overpayment in here, but I thought they also wanted a 2-year extension of their TIF. So I just want to double check that. Sending wording over to you, but I want to make sure that we didn't miss some wording.
Good afternoon, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. You should have in front of you H 397 as it passed out of Senate Government Operations. Should be looking at draft 2.5, which contains the committee's report. As far as the TIF stuff is concerned, I haven't seen that request or any similar request, but I will check with Jonathan Gray, who recently departed through the parking lot. So I will follow him.
We will let
Very
him
soon.
depart. He's been busy on these things.
Okay. Does the committee feel comfortable following along in your own copies, or do you want me to put it up on the?
I think it's helpful if you can put it up, because then people at home can see it and people in the room can see it.
All right. Well, here we are, the folks at home and the folks in the room. We'll move at a fast clip through the 2,000 foot overview of some of these sections. Section 1 updates the duties of the Division of Emergency Management to require an annual report in compliance with some of their annual reports that they provide to FEMA. They'll appear in front of Senate Government Operations and House Government Operations annually moving forward. Section 2 updates the requirements for the statewide emergency management plan. Very discrete changes here that require some consultation between the division and other stakeholders. Section 3 starts to touch upon some financy areas. And specifically, it amends 20 ESA Section 48, which is the grant program for community resilience and disaster mitigation. And if you move along to page 3, you'll note that in subsection C related to the administration of this grant program, Senate Government Operations has amended subdivision 1C to add voluntary buyouts for flood impacted or prone properties as an acceptable use of this grant program. This aligns with some sections that you likely reviewed from the budget this year that established a municipal grand list stabilization fund that issues grants from the pilot fund to municipalities or properties that have been bought out through either this discretionary program operated by emergency management, through FEMA, or through other state programs for voluntary buyouts.
And I know there are some houses that are historic and therefore don't have to be raised, but would like to either be, so this things that fall through the cracks.
Yeah, and I would note that this specific program applies exclusively to instances where the property owner has voluntarily decided to sell their property to the municipality and the state through the buyout program. And at least under all of the currently operating programs, typically, if it's a residence, the residence is removed and the property turns into open space. And that's part of a flood mitigation measure, essentially turning that property into floodplain. And that's why the Grand List Stabilization Fund comes in, because then you have a loss in the Grand List after the buyout. Section 4, this establishes some assistance to municipal corporations with access to various all-hazard and weather alert systems, at least those that are available that emergency management can assist the municipalities with. Section 5 requires a needs assessment report from the Division of Emergency Management. Once this passes through, they will come back in November if there are any resources that they need to implement various provisions of H397. The next 3 sections all touch upon municipal finances, and I'll do maybe an intermediate review of what's happening here. Subject matter the committee deals with. Section 6 adds a new section 1585 to Title 24 to establish unassigned fund balance authority for municipal corporations. It allows monies from a budget that has been approved by the voters at an annual or special meeting that have not been expended by the end of the municipality's fiscal year to be carried forward into the next fiscal year as an unassigned fund balance. So if you have, for example, approved budget item for, let's say, fire equipment, and you have $15,000 left over at the end of the fiscal year, that $15,000 could be carried forward by the legislative body into this unassigned fund balance, instead of either having to remit it or go back to the voters for approval to move that money to another purpose.
It would effectively lose the restriction from the previous budget year.
Yes. Right? I haven't been keeping up with my scrolling. This is the danger for those involved with me screen sharing. Is
You have
that
to be able to walk and chew gum to testify in here.
I don't even chew gum, so never had that problem again. Section 7 adds a new section 1790 to Title 24, which allows for emergency borrowing. And this will allow the legislative body of the municipality to incur indebtedness in the name of the municipality to respond to an all-hazard event, or for public improvements associated with an all-hazards event. And the notes or orders for this indebtedness are limited to either 5 years or a term of indebtedness not to exceed the useful life of whatever the money is being used for. Okay, Section 8. Section 8 updates 24 VSA Section 1759 to allow level debt service. I've also called this level debt repayment, so hopefully I haven't used the wrong terms in the past, for municipal corporations. So this will allow level payment over time for debt that municipal corporations assume. And Ted has an excellent explanation of how this
Okay,
plays out over time.
okay. I didn't know they couldn't do it, but
I've seen it before. I've heard it before. It's great. There are charts that I
forward to Ted for explaining.
perhaps there's even a bar graph or two. But yes, level debt payment,
Okay,
equal installments is the way that I've internalized this.
Yeah.
Okay. Section 9. We're moving back up to the higher level overview here. This amends the emergency powers of the governor to allow the drawdown of dams in anticipation of a flood event that might pose substantial risk to persons or property. And this is a unique emergency power in that it is used in advance of a flooding event, not during the all hazard. So it is called out and it's.
we know there's heavy rain forecast. The governor can order that some dams be drawn down so that they will have the capacity to deal with the anticipated but might not show up
It's a little more nuanced than that, and of course has some complicated regulatory levers that have to be pulled. What the governor would be doing isn't ordering the drawdown. The governor would be waiving any applicable environmental permits that would restrict the dam owner from releasing those waters.
Okay.
That waiver is issued after consultation with the Secretary of Natural Resources and after a formal determination by the Director of the Division of Emergency Management that there is the likelihood of one of these severe flooding events that could cause damage to property or risk, public safety.
Okay.
And the dam owner has to have a plan in place for the drawdown that evaluates a number of factors articulated in subdivisions A through G.
Okay.
Section 10 is deleted. Section 11. Section 11 amends the local option tax structure on VSA section 138. Specifically, the split between the pilot funded municipalities, it increases the municipal share to 75% and decreases the pilot special fund share to 25%. And the amendments, if you look through this section, break up that share both for purposes of the payment of the return fees and associated costs, but also with the actual payment of the grant to municipalities. So 75-25 share for both of those parts of the statute.
And right now it's
70-30.
So does jet fuel stay 70-30 or what happens to jet fuel?
Jet fuel stays 70-30 and JFO has done a presentation in the past describing the uses of the pilot fund. And one thing that's been noted consistently by JFO and Ledge Council is that aviation jet fuel has to be tied to specific expenditures under both FAA rules, but also federal law governing the use of funds that are derived from airports and airport facilities. So you have to use the money for either the airport or for aviation related expenditures.
So we can't
Typically-
give it to a town that doesn't have an airport or
Yes.
anything
And
associated with an airport.
for those that were in the House recently, you might remember the proposal from South Burlington, which didn't make it out of the House, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago. South Burlington wanted to increase the tax on certain legal services from the airport. And this was a discussion that House Ways and Means got into fairly robustly. It didn't fly in that context, but it was something that the House took a deep dive on with respect to the aviation jet fuel and airport related services.
Does the city of Burlington get that?
No,
South Burlington.
but it can only be spent on airport related things. So we have to use it on like roads around there. It's a good configuration. I think it's fine as is. Stop asking questions. Just kidding.
So what's the next section?
Just,
The next
It's theirs, you can't have it.
it's fair.
The next few sections are all updates to charters to make sure that certain chartered municipalities are able to take advantage of the 75-25 split. These are conforming amendments, we'll call them. Just making sure that those chartered municipalities don't miss out on the increase because their charters were more specific.
We are making them come in and apply individually. Okay.
Or go through the process of proposing a charter amendment. Sections 16 through, I believe it's going to be 18 or 19. These are all technical corrections. Updating the name of the Division of Emergency Management so that it's consistent throughout Vermont statute because they have had 8 different names that were being used. And that takes us into section 20. This is an amendment to the Administrative Procedures Act, and we'll call it the time freeze for the incorporation of federal regulations into Vermont's administrative rules. And it freezes for a period of 4 years any federal regulations that are incorporated by reference in an administrative rule. The meaning of that reference will be frozen unless not the General Assembly, but unless the administrative agency elects to amend their rules to change the meaning of that incorporated reference. Section 21, this is the refund of the TIF overpayment to the city of Barry. Seems to be,
It's just, I'm sure is that where you want to extend the tip 2 years?
I just want to make, there's been so many emails. And we got to this point. I also had a request to add two, we were told, technical changes to the TIF statute, which the city of Barry wanted, and apparently it was a bill put in by Representatives Cole and Duke. S-127, oh, anyway, I consulted with John Gray, who was our drafter, and I read them and they didn't sound technical to me. And he said, no, they were not technical. And so I took the liberty of canceling the 2 House members I had scheduled and just saying at this point in the session, there is no minimal technical change that if we add it to this bill, it will send it back through, I don't know how many other committees. And better next year, we could look at it next year, but this bill has been a long time in the works and I don't want to lose it because we start adding TIFs and I have never touched a TIF statute without it being a major issue. So that is not there, but I do just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Please, Representative Jack is right. If
would vary at the helpful at all.
are they asking for a 2 years?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's first the drafter has heard.
Well, we've spoken to.
Yeah, and I thought that Teddy had sent the appropriate language in. So you need to get I
Okay.
sent him an email, but I am not.
I was under the impression you had that. Apologies.
I have not had that.
I will send that.
We sent it trying to get it put in. The refund is in here, but the 2-year extension is not.
So that's the only language that you're missing.
Yeah.
You're okay. I can
Yeah,
get to
you
right
can
now.
check the extension, but that's the only stuff that Tucker got. I asked Teddy and I sent what Teddy sent me to Senator Collmore.
I'm grabbing it right now. Who should I
But-
send it to?
I'm assuming, can you send it to
Okay.
you and I will ask the committee, does anyone object to? They have been sitting on their tip because it went in originally to do parking when we put state, a big state building, originally was the whole family division was over there. And we had an unfortunate shooting incident and the family division. And I think transportation is over there now. The problem is we went to remote work and have not gone back to full work. So these 70 to 80 people they were anticipating has turned out to be 7 or 8 on any given day. But they now have an affordable housing project with Down Street they would like to work on. So this would give them a 2-year extension to start that project.
It's H419 if that's helpful. I can still send it, but it's its own bill.
It's its own bill.
H419. But I'm sending it right now.
Yeah. But I'd like to get this out of here, and I know they need the extension, and if I sit on it, it won't get out of here. Okay, so we can keep going while we straighten it out. Oh, we're at effective dates.
You're very close. Yes, there's also a refund for the town of Milton in section 22. Section 23 is a prospective repeal of those federal rule provisions that are added to the Administrative Procedures Act. And then there's the effective dates, which are staggered depending on the section we're talking about. One important one for this committee is in subsection B, the local option tax changes don't take effect until October 1st. That was at the request of the Department of Taxes to give them time to prepare for the adjustment and the share be given.
So our jurisdiction in here is. Back what? The changes in the pilot funding. Because that's a tax. And then the, we've got pilot funding and we've already created, when we looked at the budget, right? The municipal
Grand list
stabilization fund,
Yes.
which will be funded with the surplus, some of part of the surplus that is in the pilot fund. This also makes voluntary sellouts, buyouts of houses to a municipality eligible for the record, and it does the Milton TIF overpayment, the Barry TIF overpayment, and I'm hoping we're going to get the 2-year extension for the Barry TIF in here.
And there's
There's
that bundle of municipal finance and indebtedness pieces.
Okay, those are ours too?
They go to your counterpart in the House. I don't know how the Senate Secretary would have signed those.
Some of those things go to GovOps, some of them come here. In this case, they're going both, so we will take a look at them. And so do we have any questions for Tucker at this point? Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will go on. Chris, you have just something here?
Good evening, everyone. Chris, at fiscal. You all might remember that we did a drive-by of this bill a few weeks back, before you took possession of it, and it was still in GovOps being worked on. So some of this might look familiar, some of it might look new because they made a few changes, but I wanted to walk you all through the fiscal note that reflects the bill as it came out of GovOps earlier this week. So, Madam Chair, I think just to summarize what you had already mentioned, the areas of the bill that are really squarely within this committee's jurisdiction are the modification of local option tax revenue to the pilot special fund to go from the current 70-30 split to 75-25 split. And the two issues related to correcting prior year overpayments of education property taxes related to those two tips. So I'm just going to walk through real quickly here. As Tucker noted about making those changes for the community resilience and disaster mitigation grant program to make flood impacted or flood prone buyouts an allowable use of that fund. We don't really expect that's going to have like a big fiscal impact. You're sort of just changing the eligibility of an existing program that you all created last year. And I believe it was S310, which Senator Hardy, I know, worked on when she was chair of GovOps. There are three pieces related to municipal finance and indebtedness, but they don't have direct fiscal impacts to the state budget. So there's the piece about the unassigned fund balance that Tucker had mentioned. The emergency borrowing authority piece to allow towns to borrow for up to 5 years without requiring a vote in advance during emergencies, and level debt service payments. So under current law, most towns have to do, and the way we do our general obligation debt here at the state level is making level principal payments. So what that means is your payments in the first few years are higher and they go down over time. Level debt service, on the other hand, is more like your mortgage home, where you pay the same amount every year across the amortization period. So under level debt service, towns would save money in the initial years because the payments would be lower. But typically under level debt service, you pay marginally higher total interest over the life of the bond issue because you're not amortizing the principal as rapidly as you would under level principal. So that's the trade-off. The local option tax revenue share piece. So I want to get back to what Senator Matos and Senator Chittenden asked about jet fuel. Jet fuel is specifically excluded from this because that money does not hit the state share. That money does not hit the pilot fund. It goes to the T fund, and that money helps fund all the aviation related stuff that is funded out of the T fund.
Gotcha.
And since most of this has to do with the Burlington Airport. So the city of South Burlington is where the local option tax is levied. City of South Burlington keeps the 70% share to use for aviation related uses. Even though the city of Burlington, which owns and operates the airport, doesn't get that money, I just want to remind the committee that the state does filter some money from the T fund back to the Burlington International Airport every year. So that is sort of a way of the state helping deal with, making sure that some of those monies are reinvested at that airport. So right now, the 70-30 arrangement, the towns who levy the local option tax retain 70% of the money. The other 30% goes to the pilot special fund. All of this is net of the $5.96 per return fee that goes to help cover the tax department's costs. Given the effective date of October 1, we expect that this change will have a shift of about $2.4 million in FY26, and then fully annualized will be about $2.8 million to reflect the full year. So that, in layman's terms, is 2.8 million less coming into the pilot fund every year, and 2.8 million more going to the towns that have local option taxes. We do think that based on, and I want to say that these numbers do reflect estimates from all of the towns that had approved local option taxes this year, including Ludlow is now in the estimate. But something to also keep in mind is that we're in a time of economic uncertainty when it comes to consumption taxes and travel patterns, and a lot of these taxes are paid by visitors to Vermont. So let's just keep an eye on how things go in the next few months to see whether or not we have any upward or downward trends or any revisions in the consensus revenue forecast. We do, however, think that going from 70-30, 75-25, we'll still have enough money going into the pilot special fund every year to fully fund pilot payments. So this year, the budget you all passed appropriates just under $12.4 million for the pilot payments, plus another $1 million for the Grand List Stabilization Program that you mentioned, Madam Chair, and another $1.15 million for town highway non-federal disasters in the Agency of Transportation. So, those appropriations add up to over $14 million a year. But not all of them are expected to recur in the same amounts every year. The pilot payments, though, that over $12 million does recur every year. To refresh the committee's memory, FY24 was the first year that the legislature fully funded pilot payments. In prior years, pilot payments were prorated. They were not fully funded. In 24, 25, and 26, they are fully funded. If you were to go to 80-20, we do not, based on our modeling, think that the ongoing cash flow into the fund will have enough money to continue being able to fully fund these expenses, because it would be generating less than $12 million into the pilot fund. So there is a surplus in the fund. It would end up being depleted over time, or the pilot payments would have to be prorated. But if you were to go from 70-30 to 80-20, on an ongoing structural basis, you would no longer have a surplus, you would have a structural deficit.
In your modeling, are you anticipating an increase overall statewide based on the easier adoption of local options tax?
We do not model hypotheticals, but that is a good thing to keep in mind, that the law that you passed last year, we do expect more towns would could conceivably take advantage of local option taxes. A lot of the ones where it makes a lot of sense to do it have done it. And consumption taxes in general have been relatively strong since the pandemic, which is a big reason why the revenues into the pilot fund have been able to build up a surplus in the last few years. But it would not be, we would not in good faith want to model a lot of what ifs based on what towns and voters of those towns might decide to do in future years. We really want to model based on what we know right now.
And what you do know right now, if it was 80-20, do you have an estimated shortfall that we probably have to draw from the reserve fund? If it was 80-20, how much we fall short?
Tim, do you have that number right off the top of your head? I can pull this up. So 80-20 would be around just over $11 million a year would be going into the fund instead of that 14.75 under 75%.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there would be a shortfall there of likely over $1 million.
If we, she said, we are in a time of economic uncertainty. We haven't seen what the economists say yet. There's a chance people are doing things like buying cars in anticipation of price increases, which will impact some of these numbers they're buying things. It's a lot easier if the money keeps coming in at a higher rate than we're presently anticipating to go up to 80 than to go to 80 and then pull it back to 75. It's easier to spend more than to take it back. So this is first time we've ever done any increase, and this has been 20 years, 15 at least.
I thought this has been at varying rates over the years.
Yeah, way back. I think it's been at this rate since what, 2006?
Yeah, it's been,
2015?
yeah, I thought it's been about 20 years. So see how it does, and then we
Oh,
can,
sorry. 2005?
2005.
Was it 80-20 then?
It started at 60-40 in 97. And in 2005, it was changed to 70-30.
we've made it, this committee has attempted and eventually succeeded to make it easier to do local options. When it started, you had to be a gold town.
Yeah.
Or have lost a certain amount under Act 60 of your taxing capacity. Eventually, you had to come here for a charter change, so only cities with charters could do it. Except the city of Burlington, which had the ability to regulate places of victual in their charter. I brought the city of Montpelier here twice, never to have it taken up. So we've come a long way, and we've consistently expanded and made it easier for towns to do this. So,
Yeah, if I could just add to that, Madam Chair, one other thing I wanted to mention about the demands on the pilot fund and just sort of reiterate what I mentioned was you all in the budget you passed appropriated those two additional things from the pilot fund. One was for the municipal grand list stabilization program, $1 million. That is not going to fully cover all of the costs of that program in perpetuity. We expect that'll give them about the first 2 years. And that would be a 10-year program. So it'd be around, we think up to about around half a million a year, each of the first 5 years. And then already 50% less in the subsequent 5 years. That language had used to be in this bill, but it was taken out because it lives in the big bill, in the budget bill now. The other thing was, but that $1 million one-time appropriation is not going to fund 10 years of that program. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the town highway non-federal disaster appropriation. I don't know if the legislature is going to continue this arrangement in future years. The language that you all put in the bill this year made it for FY26, and that anything that was unexpended at the end of the year would revert back to the pilot fund. But it is possible that you all might continue that arrangement in future years. I don't know.
One last comment, if I may.
Yeah.
So, you brought jet fuel up again. I was being funny earlier, Senator Matos, because this was like a fallback compromise after we were denied our charter change that we approved by our town to tax rental cars. So this was an identified opportunity to at least get some money for the city to pay for everything it takes to help support airport inside of our municipal entity. But I wonder, why are we keeping the difference? Why not just synchronize it with 75-25 so it's nice and simple? It seems it would be more consistent. I get that though you want the money to come to the state, but if it's already, we're pushing for it, I
So
can see the
without-
reason or the value in having it be the same.
That's a great question. I think without wanting to interpret or read the intent of other legislative committees, I think there's sensitivity to the state of the transportation fund. And doing that would shift some money out of the transportation fund, no, not a lot, tens of thousands of dollars, but it's also an issue that is sort of tangential to what the rest of the bill is really focused on, I think.
I think if we did that, bill would not pass.
It certainly would have, more committees would have wanted to take at it.
Sure they would.
Leave it alone.
All right. That's it. Any questions, Chris?
The only other thing I wanted to mention is that I expect we're gonna need some amendments to these last two pieces about the overpayments. Just they're primarily technical in nature. My understanding is your colleagues across the hall will take a look at that. So it's a sort of a matter of the,
This is going across the hall, okay. Because I was going to talk about Barry tip and we could do that as a floor amendment and take some testimony on it, an extension. Or if you that to approach, but
You want to move this out now, is what you're saying?
I am, well, I've got a couple more witnesses, but I'm getting very sensitive to the time we're gonna be in this building. And we're gonna have to have time for committees of conference. I was gonna have us meet after the floor, but if the education bill is on the floor tomorrow, I don't think there'll be any time after the floor tomorrow. And we have the cannabis bill, which is at least long and gonna take some time to take testimony on tomorrow. So, I've got Samantha Sheehan next, if there's no questions. Chris, Ken, did we miss anything that you want to throw in?
I can provide a very, very preliminary estimate of what it would cost kind of at the end of Barry's TIF district to extend their retention period by 2 years.
Okay,
Kind of, again, we're looking at, 2040, 2041. So really looking deep into the crystal ball, but in total, their 75% retention would be approximately $770,000 in those 2 years. And approximately, so, we're looking $380,000 per year.
okay.
In 2040, 2040. Yeah.
it's right around.
Okay. Samantha. Thank you. Is Jordan gone down here? On Zoom. It was on Zoom, okay.
Okay. For the record, my name is Samantha Sheehan. I am the municipal policy and advocacy specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Sorry. Well, we're missing the title side of that. I'm happy to be back talking about this year's flood bill. There are a number of priorities for Vermont's municipalities contained within this bill. This is one of our areas of focus this session. We're happy to support swift passage of this.
Well, I think we're all trying to figure out what the yelling is.
Maybe get some exciting, do some love kids.
Just a lot of kids, they're cheering.
We moved away.
Okay.
Function in vehicle, function.
As long as they're not angry, forming the building, all right. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. We love this flood bill. We hope you pass it. I will remind you of why, what our requests particular to municipal finance in this bill are. And make one, last pitch to go to 80/20 on LOT. So we have a number of Vermont municipalities continuing to struggle with supporting, the expenses of basic fundamental government services as a result of the 2024 floods. Here is just this is just a sort of highlight reel of the, roughly 50 towns. Sorry, what was that?
I should say Plainfield isn't on there.
Oh, yeah, there are 50 towns,
Okay,
more or less.
all right.
Close to 50 towns that continue to carry flood debt from over a year ago. These are just a few of them. In many cases, as you can see, their ongoing flood debt pending FEMA public assistance reimbursement may double or triple their annual total municipal budget. So this is a significant strain on local resources and is seriously jeopardizing municipal government's ability to deliver the public services that their voters expect and deserve, that Vermonters expect and deserve. So as you heard from Tucker, section 6 would create the authority to establish an unassigned fund balance. I have one thing I'd like to say in addition to what Tucker said. So in the question about like reserve funds, so if the funds in the prior year's fiscal budget were reserve funds, they could roll over in an unassigned fund and they would still be reserved, if that makes sense. So if you create a reserve fund for fire equipment or for school tuitions,
If you don't buy the truck this year, or it costs less, and you know next year you would like to start putting away some money for another piece of fire equipment.
yeah,
That reserve fund can be rolled over. It remains reserved.
correct.
But if you have money that was just not expended, this would allow that money to be carried forward.
Yeah, because within the unassigned fund, you can have reserved and unreserved funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any limit on that? I mean, you
It's
just do that up to having $20 million. If your
Burlington's
people could let you do that.
Burlington's unassigned fund balance is about $20 million, and that's
Well,
been a
that's growing.
productive, right? That's been a productive amount for them as a percentage of their overall municipal budget.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
wondering is if you just happen to have the same 3 select board members and they just kept rolling money in every year, is there any limit on how long you can do that?
So generally, in the creation of an unassigned fund, the municipality would establish a governing policy of the fund that typically would create a target of like 3 to 7%. Could be up to 10, 11% would be the targeted amount that they would want to maintain in the unassigned fund balance.
And that would have to be voted on.
That would have to
Yeah.
be created by
So
an action of the
voting would
legislative body.
establish the fund, the unassigned balance fund, and the percentage, is that how that would work or not?
It would be created by,
You're rolling your eyes, so I'm not,
Processing.
you're processing, okay.
The
I'm learning
legislative.
the body language.
The legislative body would be the trustees here and would adopt the policy and manage the fund. They'd also likely create the fund. I think what you're looking for is where is there a control here?
Mhm.
And the ultimate answer is that all of these funds, to their origin point, is a voter approved budget item. So ultimately, the voters have control on an annual basis of what the municipal budget is going to be. And then the legislative body moving forward for any of the unexpended funds has control over allocating those unexpended funds to this balance and managing the policy of what is the cap gonna be? What does it represent as a, proportion of the overall municipal budget?
Mhm.
There's nothing in this section that would have a hard limit.
Mhm. And we don't recommend doing that because the current financial goals of a given municipal corporation may vary, as we know.
I think we have to trust voters if there is a huge. Depending whose definition of huge, funds sitting there when you're asked to raise your taxes to do something else. They're gonna
Yeah.
say,
What about that?
what about that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because once we start you'll be back here every year saying we're $100
Yeah.
over the limit and, yeah, okay.
Yes. This is really simple and really important. Currently, a municipality without a townwide vote can only take emergency debt out for 1 year of debt service. We're asking for that to go to 5. That's within the bill. It's really important because of the length of the FEMA reimbursement process for public assistance. So instead of pushing a low cash flow municipality into taking out tax anticipation notes or other types of alternatives or refinancing emergency debt through sort of successive actions, this would allow them to open up healthy, manageable debt for a repayment period of 5 years, which gives them time to navigate the FEMA reimbursement process in an appropriate way. And then as Tucker described to you, we are asking for the option of a level debt service structure. When municipalities go to bond, right now they have to pay a de-escalating amount of principal annually. We're asking them to be able to level that out so that the repayments happen the same way every year. This is generally understood within the world of governmental finance to be a conservative fiscal policy. And what we're asking for is just the option. So for the given town and the given debt and the given debt service period, the legislative body of the town has the choice between which repayment structure would be most beneficial to the town and to taxpayers. And so this is what our current only option right now looks like. So you make big payments up front and then those payments diminish over the life of the debt. The option that is added if you pass this bill allows a municipality to pay a level amount of debt service per year for the life of the debt period.
Implications for TIF.
So some questions were raised very late in this bill's life in the House right before crossover. Since then, in other Senate committees, the bond bank and the LCT have testified that this will not impact the existing TIFs, the existing big TIF districts, because of I'm like oversimplifying, but you can have a level debt service on a note right now. And in most cases, the municipalities that have a TIF also already have this authority. And so the bond bank has confirmed that the municipalities which have the ability to borrow debt or to incur debt in their districts, they are already using level debt. So you adding a level debt option will not change the debt structure of the TIFs.
Thank you.
Yeah. So lastly, so section 11 of this bill, as was explained to you, would change the local option tax formula to 75-25. That's a positive change that will be meaningful to the 34 municipalities which have a local option tax, who will be able to reserve more of those funds for their local budgets and local expenses. However, we maintain and continue to advocate that a ratio of 80-20 is sustainable for you to adopt now. And here is a short summary of prior legislative actions that have made changes at appropriate times to the local option tax programs and authorities. As we heard, the most recent and significant one is the ability for non-chartered municipalities to take up a local option tax vote without having to go through legislative approval. But that is not the only thing that has changed in the last 5 to 10 years that is driving the rising revenues in the pilot special fund. So I'm actually going to start there and then end with the math. So the factors driving the increase in LOT revenues to the state are significant and include the Wayfair decision, which means we apply LOT sales tax to online purchases. In the past, this sort of conventional wisdom that more or less did play out and was true is that the sort of political will to get a local option tax approved through charter process was only available to the municipalities that had large commercial districts because they had a lot of on the ground retail and commerce happening and a lot of visitors coming in to buy things. Now with the very common practical sort of daily experience of most Vermonters participating in online commerce, every municipality has an opportunity to pass a retail LOT and to receive funds for it. These taxes are also applied to cannabis, which is now legal, and there are a lot of cannabis related transactions across the state. So municipalities that have approved cannabis sales are sort of now incentivized also to pass an LOT. The proliferation of short-term rentals is driving up the rooms LOT taxes and also incentivizing municipalities to bring new rooms LOTs forward so that they can capture that even if they don't have a sort of traditional lodging establishment. Or if they just don't want to tax their traditional local lodging establishment. And then, as you heard, the general growth in consumption tax receipts is up over 40%. So all of this combined with the new towns that are taking up local option taxes, we think means that these revenues will remain healthy for some time ahead. Using JFO's numbers from, I guess, 2 weeks ago, they've been slightly updated since then in today's brief. What is important for you to understand is that there is a significant existing surplus. So the end of fiscal year 2024 surplus was 10.3. It will likely be by the end of next month, 14 million, roughly above 14 million. That is before the FY26 appropriations and before the FY26 revenues hit the fund. So if you go to 75-25, that surplus will likely be over 13 million next year, sitting in state coffers, not going to work in local communities to deliver public service. If you go to 80-20, there would be that close to $3 million delta in terms of fiscal year 26's revenue and expense to the pilot fund. However, that is supported or augmented by this substantial surplus. So when you account for the surplus, that surplus that is retained falls to over 10 million. So, and remember, right now, it is over 10 million. So going to 80-20 does actually not change the status quo in the amount of surplus being retained in the pilot special fund. And then this just says that in different words. The revenues have accelerated quickly over a short period of time, and we expect them to continue to.
So I'll say I fully support going to 80-20. I just am a realist, and it seems like what 75-25 is a good step in the right direction. And next year we can prove out, since we can't model hypotheticals, if we do see that this continuing to increase and gain additional revenues. I'm lucky enough to continue to serve in this role. I feel like the 80-20 is the conversation to have next. That's my read of the building.
If I could respond to that, and thank you for your support, Senator, but it is knowable that there will be more than 10 million in surplus next year. You have passed the appropriations, we know what they'll be. And the Department of Taxes, Commissioner Gresham, can confirm what the last 3 quarters of revenues into that month have been.
Okay, but
Yeah.
we don't know what the economy will do. Don't know what was going to happen this tourism year. We don't know the impact of tariffs on sales, so we will money committees can be conservative. If it's going, the meeting. Okay. What?
No.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And I've Jordan Gonda next. Okay. Welcome, John Ford, and just introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jordan Gonda. I'm the General Counsel of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. I'm here to speak. It looks like Mike O'Grady is just coming in, so maybe he has or will be presenting a proposed amendment to this legislation. I don't know if you have seen language yet. Would you?
Are you on? We are on 397.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So
Okay.
this is language.
Marty suggested that we invite you and she's gone. So,
She's the one with the amendment.
and she's the one with the amendment. So we're not sure. So you can have the floor and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Well, we did cover, and I was present for the testimony in 397, which includes a provision that would give agencies the ability. Well, it would basically reserve in time federal regulations that are incorporated by reference into state rules. What I'm going to speak to you today about is a similar concept. A related concept, and would essentially provide an additional basis for rulemaking for agencies. So currently in Title III of Vermont's Administrative Procedures Act, administrative agencies have the ability to initiate rulemaking and specifically have the ability to expedite rulemaking in an emergency setting if the emergency rule is necessary to abate an imminent public health related risk. The proposal would expand the basis to initiate emergency rulemaking if a change to a federal amendment or a change to a federal regulation, policy, et cetera, would create a regulatory gap in the state's regulatory programs that would result in a conflict with our statutory mandates to operate our regulatory program. So in essence, this is a pretty discrete tool that would allow us to fill any gap in our regulatory programs that's resulting from any imminent action at the federal level that removes or impacts some of the state's current regulatory authority. I do want to note, though, that the language that I've been able to see is broad. It speaks to any state agency. I'm here only on behalf of ANR, and I can't speak specifically to the impacts that this would have on other agencies. But as you may know, ANR implements many regulatory programs within its 3 departments. We do rely a great deal on federal regulations, policies, and other directives, and are in a a new realm of uncertainty and are tracking very closely what seems to be broad and very sweeping efforts to deregulate in many of the areas that we have analogous state programs with respect to. So that's in essence the proposed concept that would be included with the other provisions of H 397.
All right, I'm gonna say that that request is really not in the jurisdiction of this committee. It really should be in government operations, and there are provisions similar to that in here. Is there a reason you didn't go to government operations? They've had this bill for weeks.
I can't speak to why it was in there. My understanding is we were, Senator Collmore was supportive and asking questions of this legislation. My understanding is that it was part of incorporated into the bill and should have been once it was transferred to your committee.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer than that.
To talk to government operations and have them do a floor amendment for you, because this is really their jurisdiction, and not having heard from them as to why it's not in there. Where they put other ones in, I'm not comfortable doing that. And it can go on as a floor amendment. So I believe this is going to appropriations. So if we get this out today, we can get it to appropriations. And if the committee chair says, we forgot it, will you put it in? That's one thing, but I'm not comfortable.
So even if we did it, it'd have to go before them anyway, so we might as well start with them.
Well,
It's theirs.
they're gonna have to approve it. So I would say, talk to the chair of GovOps. And if he wants to move this forward, then we can put it in, or appropriations can move it in.
Okay, yes. Well, thank you. And I apologize for not having a better answer. I'm happy to go back to my
That's
leadership
fine.
and pursue that.
And the senator that asked to have you come in just left and hasn't said anything to me. So I am in the dark on this one. But it is the end of the session, and that's how things move around here.
Well understood.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Committee. I'm trying to move these out. They've got one more stop, and if they're gonna end up in any kind of conference, we've got like 4 days unless somebody's sending us in. Well, I was wondering if is it possible to get a Barry extension amendment? Or do we have to send that out to the hall?
If that is something the committee would like, I can prepare an amendment with the extension language from 8490.
Committee, is that
Yeah, I'm fine with
right? Okay,
it.
we will do that. If you can get back to us, is today possible?
Yes, but I would have to leave right now.
That's
So,
fine.
Okay.
Have I got, you're not on the next one, right? Okay, we will put this off until the end of the day. And then we can vote on it and get it across the hall. All right. Okay, moving on. We've got H 231. We're 5 whole minutes ahead. We'll make it up. Okay. This is an act relating to technical corrections to fish and wildlife statute. Michael, you're back.
I am.
You're regular here this week. And James.
Yes.
This must be our fish and wildlife.
You want it on screen or not?
Yes, if you can do it without a lot of angst. So my aunt that used to boil the pigeon's eggs on her fire escape and leave them sitting on them, wouldn't do that in Vermont.
Not legally.
Did she eat them then?
No,
Oh,
no, she just didn't want any more pigeons on her. But this was in Boston many, many years ago.
oh,
I was kind of horrified when she told me that's what she thought.
that is definitely the first time I've ever heard that. Learn something new every day.
Jeez. A year. This is asking a lot. I don't know the difference between an English sparrow and a house sparrow. Or a starling or a European starling. I know a grateful, but is it a
Ready?
ready?
Okay, so you will see up on
I've got my wildlife, my bird thing on.
That'll help you with the.
That'll help me, okay.
So do you want a general walkthrough or just focus on revenue? All right,
20,000, how long is it?
it's 26 pages.
Committee, do you want a 2,000-foot walkthrough? Just go to our area.
I would say go through more quickly on,
30,000 foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is Michael Grady with Legislative Council. You're looking at draft 522, May 13th, date 9/54, timestamp. It's an act relating to technical corrections, official wildlife statutes. There are several provisions that relate to revenue. I will point them out as I go through. Section 1, just delete some obsolete terms from the definition section for fish and wildlife statutes. Section 2 clarifies when it's prohibited to remove the nest or eggs of wild birds. Section 3 amends and kind of reorganize some of the uniform point system for fish and wildlife violations. So everyone knows what the uniform point violation system is.
Hunting license?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Section 4 on page 5 adds additional types of weapons to the prohibitions on shooting from motor vehicles or carrying loaded weapons in your car. This is the anti-jacking statute. And one of the, there are some additional weapons of preference for those that would violate the hunting season and license requirements. They include air rifles, arrow rifles, and pre-charged pneumatic rifles. And you will see that there is a definition of what those are. And they would be added to the rifle or shotgun as something that you could not carry in your car with a loaded cartridge shell or other projectile. In addition, you cannot carry a loaded crossbow in your motor vehicle, motorboat, airplane, snowmobile, etc. Again, that is an anti-jacking provision. So without any questions on that, I can move on to section 5. This is providing an alternative way to enforce the use of waters law. As you may know, the use of waters rule now includes prohibitions on wake boats and wake sports. But generally, that provision was adopted under Title 10. And Title 10 is usually enforced by ANR. But most of the other vessel provisions in statute are enforced under Title 23 by state police and the wardens. And this would allow for enforcement of those use of waters rules either by ANR's traditional enforcement authority at 10 VSA Chapter 201, or a fine issued under Title 23, the traditional fines for operation of motor vessels and other vessels. Section 8 or Section 6, page 8. Right now, most fish and wildlife violations are criminal unless they're listed as Judicial Bureau offenses. This is listing those use of waters offenses as Judicial Bureau offenses. Judicial Bureau is the entity that, or the judiciary, that enforces civil penalties. Section 7 is a revenue provision. This provides a free license to a person with developmental disabilities who's a Vermont resident, provided that they provide a signed statement from their treating healthcare provider certifying that the person meets the definition of a person with developmental disabilities. Now, as you know, that the department is largely a license-based, fee-based program. And one of the things that they've been concerned about is the loss of revenue from free licenses required by the General Assembly. H231 would require the commissioner to maintain an accounting of lost revenue due to the issuance of free licenses. And she will handle honor before January 15th, submit to you an accounting of the lost revenue from the previous calendar year due to the issuance of free licenses. So you can evaluate your own choices without free licenses, and the revenue impacts that they may have. Section 8 relates to the ability of the commissioner to designate Labor Day weekend as a free mentored fishing weekend, during which one unlicensed angler can fish with one licensed angler throughout the 3-day period. So there might be lost fee revenue there if that one unlicensed angler was otherwise required to get a license. Section 9 clarifies the authority for the permitting or licensing of fishing tournaments. Really the key for your committee is it changes the fee for a tournament, for the permit for the tournament, from a $50 flat fee to hold the tournament to kind of a tiered system. Tournaments with up to 25 participants pay $10. Tournaments with 26 to 50 pay $30, and tournaments with more than 50 pay a fee of $100. Then you're moving into the big game violations. Is your committee the committee that says they have jurisdiction over fines? I can't remember either Ways and Means.
I think it's usually
Judiciary
areas talks about fines.
Well,
Senator Sears used to get really touchy about that.
yes, he got touchy about.
That's not true.
Loving Lisa. So this would clarify what is a big game violation, and it would also increase the maximum fines for big game violations, both the upper maximum and the minimum and the range that could be charged. And then it defines what are big game violations. Do you need to go through all of those?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Section 11 relates to the jurisdiction over fish and wildlife violations. As I noted earlier, currently most fish and wildlife violations are enforced through the criminal division of the Superior Court, but the department is looking in Section 12 to provide that except for big game offenses and under revocation offenses, when you're caught hunting without a license or a suspended license, any fish and wildlife violation and not otherwise listed in the section shall be charged as a minor violation. if the offender has no prior history of fish and wildlife violations, no evidence was seized in relation to the violation, the criminal warrant was not used in relation to the violation, and there's no possibility of forfeiture. This is basically to do a couple of things. Most people who are cited with fish and wildlife violation don't know it's criminal. And will often just agree to pay the waiver and then have a criminal violation on their record. This will also reduce the backload in the criminal division, and it will actually allow for faster, more efficient enforcement of fish and wildlife violations, because in the criminal division, fish and wildlife violations can be deprioritized. Section 13 is a new section of law related to the taking of reptiles and amphibians. You may not know, or you may know, that if you have a valid fish and wildlife hunting license, you can take as many reptiles or amphibians as you would like, unless they are a threatened or endangered species. This would provide that a person shall not intentionally take a reptile or amphibian in the state unless authorized by the rules. This does not go into effect though until January 1, 2027. So the commissioner will have time to establish requirements on page 16, lines 1 and 2 regarding collection, possession of reptiles and amphibians, including commercial use, export, or sale. The taking that would be allowed for those widespread and abundant species, those species that due to population risk to other native species or risk to ecosystems have been identified as requiring reduction, and any other specified criteria that under specified criteria, taking, collection, or possession of a specified reptile or amphibian for scientific, educational, and non-commercial ceremonial purposes. Section 14 is kind of an implementation prior to the commissioner's rules on the taking and import of reptiles and amphibians. So the pond slider, which is a turtle and not native, is a concern because of its effect on native populations. Person shall not import, possess, or sell in the state of pond slider, provided that the person may continue to possess a turtle that is legally acquired as a pet prior to July 1, 2025. And then there's an inventory exception. Person with a valid pet dealer permit, commercial collection permit may possess and sell a turtle, but the person can document they had possession of prior to July 1, 2025. These are sold by pet stores, and so people may have them as pets already, and there may be an inventory of them in pet stores. And so the committee wanted people to maintain their pets. No more seizing of the turtles. If anyone was here the last time the turtle was seized, it's not.
I don't even remember that.
And so that allows you to move on to section 15, which is transport, importation, possession, and stocking of wild animals. This is existing law, but it clarifies that it's going to apply to reptiles and amphibians. And then on page 19, any person who violates this section may be subject to the penalty set forth in 4518, which is big G violations, and also may be required to pay additional penalties for mitigation and economic benefit. And the commissioner may bring an action in the unit of the criminal division for a violation or the environmental division to compel reasonable mitigation and recover economic benefit. Section 16, this is clarifying some prohibitions under the Threatened and Endangered Species Law. Section 17 and 18 are related. So during the process for issuing an incidental take permit, allowing a person to take, kill, modify the habitat of a threatened and endangered species, the location of that species is often public during the regulatory process, but there are for an endangered species in the state that the department wants to keep confidential their location because they don't want to provide an incentive to people to go and collect them. Or so what is provided in section 18 is additional authority for the commissioner to designate the location during the regulatory process of these threatened or endangered species as confidential. She will maintain a subset list of those species whose specific name should not be included in regulatory planning. And then section 19, this is probably more an appropriations issue, but it does relate to the FISC. This would strike authority or a requirement in statute that the Department of Fish and Wildlife reimburse a farmer who suffers damage by deer or bear to their crops, fruit trees, or livestock if the farmer's land was not posted and the amount of damage does not exceed $5,000 per year. So that would be struck, and then we get to the effective dates.
So I'm not even sure why we,
The license fees,
the
the
license.
free license fee for the
Free
person with
license.
developmental disability, the change in the license fee for the fishing tournaments, and the ability of the commissioner to designate Labor Day weekend as a free fishing weekend where an unlicensed angler can fish with a licensed angler for the 3 days. Those are the fee revenue components.
So,
James might have more.
yeah, I said we probably this one, no. Any questions for Michael? Okay.
James Duffy, joint fiscal office. I'll pull up the fiscal note behind me here. But as legislative council just explained, the of interest to this committee really are the changes to fees and implications for fee revenue that's generated for the Division of Fish and Wildlife. So section 7 of the bill would create authority to issue free lifetime fishing licenses for Vermont residents with developmental disabilities. So this obviously represents a cost to the state in the form of foregone fishing license revenue. The scale of that foregone revenue really depends on the number of people who take advantage of this permit. And because it's a lifetime duration, it depends on, how long that permit lasts for. And, so those are two variables that are difficult to pin down, but looking at states with similar provisions, the Department of Fish and Wildlife and Joint Fiscal estimate this would cost approximately $2,800 per year in foregone license revenue based on the uptake that we've seen in states with similar provisions and similar license fees and license utilization. This section would also require DFW, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, to report back to the legislature annually to the committees of jurisdiction on foregone fishing license revenue for both this exception and others provided under other statutes. Section 9 is expected to have de minimis impact. It would close what you might consider a loophole that allows folks to have one season long fishing tournament permit for fishing tournaments that are held on non-consecutive days. So it would require, multiple fishing tournament permits if you're going to be holding a tournament on non-consecutive days. It would also create a tiered permit structure as opposed to the current flat permit fee of $50. So on the one hand, you are decreasing the permit cost for tournaments of some sizes by bringing the fee down to 50 from 100. But on the other hand, you're also presumably generating some additional fee revenue from creating a new requirement for tournaments on non-consecutive days. So overall, this is expected to have a de minimis impact on fee revenue for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then finally, of interest to this committee, there could be some potential downstream revenue impacts to the Fish and Wildlife Fund and or the general fund stemming from the amendments to Fish and Wildlife enforcement provisions. You're seeing some fine maximums increase in this bill. And so to the extent that, you know, those maximum fines are imposed, you could see additional revenue flowing to the state from enactment from enforcement of these provisions. That would really depend a lot on judicial discretion in terms of what the amount of fines levied or penalties levied are. There's also a change in jurisdiction here under sections 11 and 12 of the bill that would bring fish and wildlife violations are classified as minor. It would reclassify certain violations as minor, which brings them under the jurisdiction of the Judicial Bureau instead of the Criminal Division of Superior Court. And then Legislative Council also mentioned Section 19. This is, as he said, really more of an appropriations item, but this would repeal an existing Department of Fish and Wildlife program that reimburses farmers for certain bear and deer crop damage. That costs the state an average of about $4,400 per year in recent years.
Because it's not a highly used.
There have been some changes to it in recent years. You can see the fiscal note, the cost in some recent years was a bit higher, but since then there has been a $5,000 annual cap per farmer. So those are the fiscal implications of the bill. I will also add that
It sounds close to de minimis.
yes, certainly I would consider this one de minimis. Michael also mentioned the free Labor Day, free fishing day on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
In talking with the department, we're expecting it to also be de minimis. Many of the folks who'll be out fishing without a license that day, probably folks who might have had a license already, might be new to fishing. Overall de minimis fiscal impact.
All right. Questions for James? Not seeing any. Thank you. Looking forward to this.
Move it.
Well, I want to see if Colonel Stedman had anything to add. Okay, Commissioner,
I know nothing to add unless there's questions.
committee. Reaching for the sheet.
Any press?
Is someone going to make a motion?
Please.
I'll move this.
Okay. Senator Brock has moved that we approve H 231, an act relating to technical corrections to fish and wildlife statutes, as presented to us. Is there any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Senator Chin.
Yeah.
Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Hewlett. Absent.
No, she's not zooming.
She's not zooming.
Ah, all right. She zoomed in this morning.
Senator Beck. Senator Hardy. Absent. Senator Matos, yes. Senator Cummings.
Yes. That is 403.
Yep.
Senator Manos, would you like to report on?
Sure.
The word de minimis is all you have to say about it.
Love it.
It's our favorite word. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, we are on a roll. We're going to go to S51. Which we don't have. We voted it out. This was our unpaid caregiver tax credit. It went to the other body. They stripped out the caregiver tax credit and added the tax credit that the governor had proposed in his budget. And I've asked Kirby to come and kind of walk us through it. We could probably do it just a tutorial for Senator Matos because the rest of us are on the committee of conference. But it's just a quick walkthrough. I was hoping our other members were here. I know Senator Hardy was very, but she passed me a note that said she's in Senate Education for an amendment. I don't know to what bill, since education bill is on the floor, maybe they're taking up another one. But we are here, and I thought just so everyone knew what was going on, Kirby could just give us another 2,000. Maybe if we can do this quickly, we might actually get a little break in, if you would like, before going on to 484. Kirby, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Kirby Beatland, City Council. Would the chair like me to walk through the entire bill? I also have a section by section if you want to hit just one.
Section by section. There was, if you've got questions.
Sounds great.
beyond Any depth, it's pretty,
I have a specific question too for this movie.
okay.
The dependent care credit that the chair of House Ways and Means brought up near the end, I didn't know how that would intersect with the caretaker's credit. If you had any background on that.
Sure. So Pat and I discussed that a little bit after that meeting. In the case of people giving care for a dependent, they have to be a dependent to get that credit. So there's a little bit of overlap. But it's getting at different stuff. The dependent child, that's more of the dependent care credit is more about reimbursing expenses that you had. Whereas the proposed S51 tax credit was about compensating for time and care.
Dependent must be 18 or under.
And not necessarily for that credit.
Maybe any age you want.
Well, that's the Fed, that's a long-standing federal tax.
Yeah. Okay. And I could come back. and we'll talk about it.
Its classification of dependent is somewhat different than between the two definitions, though, isn't it? And who would qualify?
Between those two credits, yes, to put it really simply, the child and dependent care credit is going to be a smaller group compared with the types of people to be cared for under the proposed credit.
Thank you.
Okay. Walk us through.
Okay. So, as the chair mentioned, S51, when it went to the House, it was an act relating to unpaid caregiver tax credit. That tax credit was removed. And other credits and exclusions were added. Most of what is coming out of the House, at least relates to administrative or proposals from the administration. So the first two were from the administration. The first is a change to the Vermont child tax credit, increasing the age for a qualifying child from 5 to 6. So broadening who can claim that credit. Second change is to the EITC, which makes 100% of the federal credit available to people who do not have a qualifying children. The background on that is that if you have qualifying children, the amount you get at the federal level for the EITC is significantly larger than if you don't have qualifying children. So for providing 100% of the credit in Vermont for people who don't have qualifying children, they're still not getting as large credit, but it gets a little certain. Also came from the. The third is some changes to exclusions for retirement income. Part of it is from the administration, and part of it is a modification of what the administration had proposed. The first part is the same as the administration, which is to increase all of the AGI thresholds to get the full exclusion amount under the Social Security benefits exclusion, and to get the full $10,000 limit amount under the civil service retirement systems and similar retirement systems. So all those thresholds were increased by 5,000.
So we've done that. Or our new ones since we put them in. We've been trying to get everybody, all pension types on the same playing field and then move that top number up as we can afford it and as inflation requires. So this moves it up another 5,000.
Yes, exactly. And the rest of it has to do with military retirement. The administration had proposed to fully exempt military retirement income. What the House does here is fully exempt from military retirement income and also add survivor benefits, which was part of the administration proposal to add survivor benefit income. But for those two types of retirement income, to fully exempt it up to an AGI of 125,000, and then between 125,000 and 175,000 to phase it out. So not fully what was proposed, but by Vermont standards, those are high AGI thresholds. And what the House did with the amount of money that was like quote unquote saved from the estimates for not fully excluding the military retirement and survivor benefit income was to create a Vermont veteran tax credit of a fundable credit of $250 for people with a service record who have less than 120 or 125,000 or not 125,000 or less AGI, and then to phase that out up to 30,000 of AGI. So if you're looking at, again, if you're looking at where that money came from the change to the military retirement, that extra estimated money went to that veteran credit. And that's the House version.
Do you know if they took, because that group of veterans, group of people, truly low income on general assistance is a group we've been trying to help with tax credits. And the last time we looked at them, we found out by giving them the a refundable tax credit. Is this a refundable? Okay. So we're essentially probably giving them $250, that would negatively impact their food stamps. Last time we did this, I remember because Senator Kitchell was always trying to find a way to help this group. We probably put a few of them out on the street when we ended the motel program this year. Did they take any testimony on other benefits?
No.
Okay, so we might want to ask for that in the committee conference, because let's see. It ended up that if we paid it all in one lump sum, they might have lost SNAP benefits for that month. Originally, we had done it like in 4 payments, thinking we'd get it down, but it's something to check on. Because it ended up they lost more than we were given. So I'll ask to have them look at that.
Okay, yeah. So generally, I would think $250 for most people, it wouldn't be the difference in hitting that limit. But
These are really tight. I mean, I remember, and it may have been more than 250, but I remember when we were looking the last time we did a group of tax credits, when we did the Social Security and the railroad pensions, that we looked at that group. And there was a problem with impact, which is why we usually look at the earned income tax credit, because that one specifically does not impact your eligibility for other benefits. The big one being childcare, which we have now smoothed out, but it used to throw you over the cliff and you lost more than you gained. So that we should check on. Okay. Any other questions for Kirby?
Well, the only other good question is going to be when in the conference committee, the likelihood is that there may be a potential amendment that would focus on eliminating the cutoff, the $125,000 to $175,000 slide for retirement benefits. Because from the Economic Development Committee standpoint, the reason it was done that way in particular was as a workforce development issue. And at that 125, some of the very people we're looking for with occupational skills, particularly those in the family, would be cut off from the program. And so that was just that's an issue of discussion in terms of amending our proposal. I think what we talked about, at least in economic development, was we have this proposal, which the House has done, and then we have an amendment to another bill, which is still in progress right now, which is our workforce development bill, that would create the language to do that without such an exemption. The decision point that we're looking at right now is whether or not to continue with that amendment or to see how this goes. If this goes quickly and then drop that amendment. But this is going to be done in the next obviously couple of days.
It is my intention not to take up the workforce development bill until I hear from the Economic Development Committee as to what they want us to do. To send that back to Ways and Means pretty much means,
Sure.
And if that stays on there, it will go to Ways and Means, which means it won't last.
Probably go to Ways and Means regardless.
Yes,
I think, because
But
all of us
it's
have revenue.
whether or not it gets through this year, does that which you
Point.
want amendment.
That's important.
So otherwise it's concurring.
So did I just ask Senator Brock a question? So, I'm curious, so I don't love what the House did because it's about our
The
tax
caregiver-
credit,
and
which
I'm
I
in favor
really want back in.
of the caregiver tax credit as well.
Thank you. But I think the reason that they included that sort of slide, the 125 to 175, is that's a sort of common slide that we've been using for other tax policy, including the caregiver tax credit, tax credit and others. And they did that to sort of not create a cliff, but also to create sort of, progressive tax policy so that as you earn more, you pay more, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I know you know this, but I hear you about the economic development thing. So I'm wondering if there's some other way to get at that sort of maintains the integrity of equitable tax policy, but also meets the goal of economic development for the population that you want to target.
Well, I feel that as this read right now, it will fail to meet that. And this is principally a case of the population that we are seeking has a benefit that is substantially greater than what we have now by far in every state in the United States except one.
No, I hear that, and I've
And
heard
that's-
these
so that's
arguments
one.
before, but
No, but as I'm looking at economic development tool. Secondly, if in this case we present what the amendment does to the population that we're seeking, it will eliminate their consideration of a bond. It will not be persuasive because, again, a married person, two teachers will not meet this criteria.
do you have any good source for showing that this kind of thing has been an economic development tool in another state
Yes.
that has it?
Yeah,
Is there
we've got a
studies on
couple
that?
of studies that have been done, and the thing is, really, one most interesting study is a study that South Carolina did recently. And what that study showed using a REMI model, which is the same model that we use to measure economic growth and in terms of things like VEGI and economic growth incentives, is that this showed a return on investment after year 2. And that is, again, what we're trying to say is that it's, I think, great to show the benefit to veterans, which we want to do. It's and so on, and every other state has done it. But we packaged it this year in a way that says it's not just an economic, it's just not an economic prison. it is designed to target a specific audience that we are in desperate need of in Vermont, such as teachers and medical assistants and so on. And then to couple our development efforts with that as one of the things on the plate that we're trying to achieve, that is likely to make a difference. What we're doing here is not.
Okay, did the Remy model,
That study to us?
Yeah,
I'm
I
not sure I've seen it.
yeah, I can get you all a copy of it.
did the Remy model count? Because I believe South Carolina has military bases,
Mhm.
which we don't.
Mhm.
Did they distinguish between people who retired at 40 and stayed or people that moved in? Because we don't have a base for people
don't.
to stay.
Mhm.
So I'm looking for who moved in,
Mhm.
because if you retire at 40, you're probably got some kids in school, high school.
That's correct.
You
And
don't.
I think they did do some
Yeah,
counts
I'd
in
like
terms
to
of how
see
many
what that would.
people
Okay.
who did as families as opposed to those who came solely as retirement along without that.
All right,
There
well,
there are numbers there with that, yes.
That's an economic development discussion.
Mhm.
And until economic development decides what they want me to do with it, I'm not gonna take it up. They need to decide if they want to leave that on. Have
Well,
it
we'll do it.
That-
The intent is going to be to do it as potential amendment, and bring it up in the discussions, if you will, in the committee of conference.
So would you like it stripped off this bill and get this bill moving?
No, I'd like to leave it on this bill for now with the notion of amending what they have done.
Can I ask another
The
question?
notion of amending, we have a bill. You want to put this whole bill on what? What are you amending?
The only thing that we're amending is that we are talking about amending is the language that the House has used on S-51 relative to veterans.
Okay, so you want to amend, all right,
Correct.
that's a committee of conference.
That's correct. That's a committee of conference issue.
Right, do you want,
S-34, which exists separately, that has the amendment that exempts all military
Yeah.
retirement, has not come to finance yet, has it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our now, right, it is here. It is here, but it hasn't been acted on.
Right.
And we would ask that that be held for right now, because either way,
that's
you
being
said
held.
that you're not gonna take it up because it has the other
No.
things you don't have time to
What
deal with.
I need to know, and I asked you to get feedback from the chair.
I did.
I have S-34, it's sitting up there. I have S-51 with the same amendment on it. I have, that same amendment has been modified, but military pensions is now in committee of conference.
Correct.
The Senate added military pensions to S-51.
The House.
No, the Senate added it.
That's
S 51, oh no, it's not 51,
34.
it's 34.
Correct.
Yeah, so if we don't remove that amendment, then 31, that, what are we looking at? Is 231, is going to get sent back to Ways and Means. And they will not concur because they've already done
that.
something. All right.
Yeah, we know that.
So that means that that whole bill is not going to get passed this year.
Well,
If we take it off, that doesn't preclude you from trying to amend anything anywhere.
Sure.
If we take it off, that bill, we could just strip it. They can, they can concur because it's so different. And that bill passes until I hear from the chair of economic
I had a
development.
conversation with her yesterday to do that was to hold 34 for a day or two to see if the committee of conference moved, but to get 34 cleaned in a way that would go through this year if we're able to do it within the next couple of days. Now, I'll have another conversation with her and come back to you,
We
hopefully later today, with
only
a
have
conversation
a
about.
couple of days.
Understood.
All right. Okay,
I had a question, I think probably for Kirby. The version that Senator Brock was talking about that is on H 34, the sort of full enchilada for military retirement, how much does that cost?
Oh, I would leave that to JFO. What I
It's
can say
3.9 million.
3.9.
is the veteran tax credit that exists in S 51, what that costs is the same as the changes that are made to the
I see.
retirement.
Okay,
So, considering, if you want, and this is accounted for in the budget. So if you want to keep that alone, then to make the change that Senator Brock's talking about, unless you change effective dates and push it out or something like that, if you want to do it immediately, it would mean removing the veteran credit and then making the military sort of benefit exemption.
got it.
13 point something million is what's in the budget. I'm just saying is the House spent it all. It spent less on the phone than this one would anticipate.
The difference is about 1.4 million.
And that went to give a tax credit to low income veterans, not veterans who had served 20 years, but more like the guys you see in the Wounded Warrior ad that are making less than
And
25,000.
there is some modification that would have some effect. We're not able to determine how much that effect would be. Because one of the things the House did is included all veterans, including those that got dishonorable discharges, bad conduct discharges, and so on, which we, again, in dealing with S 51 and Comscore, of course, removed from that.
We could ask to have that clarified.
That seems like low hanging fruit.
Okay, committee, we've gotten a briefing on what's in that bill. Michael, the next bill is also yours,
And Kirby,
agriculture. I was gonna give them a break. Can you,
You might want to talk to Kirby now, so you could just let him go.
okay,
Remember 484 amends the definition of agricultural land to allow a person who donates up to $2,000 in crops to
okay,
qualify.
this one we've been through, all right.
And it also provides two,
The first 10,000.
the 10,000 net profit. And then the capital gain when you are selling to your family
That's right.
member or a long-term farm employee, and the property remains in
So-
farming.
James is here to give us James, you was here, I'll
He gave you the fiscal note.
It's
That's
gone on
right.
last time, we have asked.
No,
I don't think he did. Wasn't that the issue that the fiscal note wasn't prepared yet? So if you,
No, I think the issue was that you wanted to talk to Kirby about how those deductions. were.
okay.
There's a fiscal note on your page for today. Maybe James updated it.
Okay.
And then we invited Senator Ingalls to come down and ask us and explain to us what he was thinking. I think it was, there was the no capital gains if you sell land to a family member or a long 10-year employee. There was a deduction for the first $10,000 of
Net farm profit.
net farm profit. And there's Senator Ingalls, who's here to tell us what he was thinking.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
We will hear from everyone. Then that's Fish and Wildlife would like to have a cut amendment on here or natural resources. Somebody who is in it here regularly. It's like it. Okay, so committee, can you do without a break and just keep going? All right. Because I'm not sure when we're gonna all get called to talk about education. So Kirby, let's keep going.
So you would like me to talk about the capital gains part?
Yes, that's the one that's in your valley thing, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And this, I've got 51, I don't have anything from you on 484 that's proposed.
No, I don't have anything for you on this. What I can do is show you the language again briefly and then just answer your questions about how this could interact with the way
Okay,
capital gains works.
okay, yeah. Explain what's going on, then we will get. We have a fiscal note?
We do.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna fiscal.
Okay, so the first part of it is, these are all exclusions from, taxable income in Vermont. That's what we're looking at, that part of the law.
Okay.
So the first is the amount of any net foreign profit, provided the taxpayer's net foreign profit during the tax year does not exceed $10,000. And then the capital gains part's next. The adjusted net capital gain income from the sale of real estate that is part of a farming operation, provided the buyer continued using the real estate as part of the farming operation, and one is related by blood, marriage, civil union, or adoption, or two, the buyer was an employee of the farming operation for a minimum of 10 years prior to sale. So there's some issues there with tax administration that the Department of Taxes would chime in on that now,
Okay,
leave that there.
so we will
Um,
get the tax department in, hopefully. Let's get this on for tomorrow.
and my understanding is that these things are not accounted for in the budget, is that,
Okay,
so it's,
all right,
that would be a factor of having tax come in if it's not something that's gonna realistically move forward.
okay,
But, so the capital gains part. This would exclude any capital gain from the sale of this real estate. Capital gains flows through to Vermont from the federal return. One thing I could add is that at the federal level, there is an exclusion for, selling your home. For single filers, it's $250,000. For joint, it's $500,000 value for your home.
that used to be, to seem like a magnanimous amount, and now it's.
Good point. Right,
Okay.
uh,
But you have to,
so there could be some overlap with that.
right, and you have, yeah, it's your home, and you have to buy another, right? I thought,
No, no.
I
no,
don't think so for that. I
okay.
think there's a test, there's two parts,
There's a-
ownership and use. And it's, 2 out of the last 5 years you have. to-
That's it, this is time. All
Yeah.
right,
So there's some overlap, maybe not all of these farming operations, but some of them might have used that exclusion at the federal level. So what's being excluded here would be whatever capital gains left. So that's one thing
Well,
to
if-
think about.
okay. If I'm living on the farm. If I sell a piece of the farm which doesn't have my primary residence on it, I don't get a capital gains, right? That capital gains, that
The exclusion. the federal-
exclusion,
you-
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So this would be if I sold off the back 40 to my husband, brother, cousin,
Mhm.
okay, son or daughter, all right.
So there's that, and then there's the Vermont treatment. At the federal level, the reason, so taxpayers, just give you just a quick version of this. A taxpayer at the federal level wants a long-term capital gain in a lot of cases because it gets taxed at a lower rate at the federal level if you have a long-term capital gain. In Vermont, we don't have different rates. It goes into your taxable income. But what Vermont does do is exclude part of it, and taxpayers have a choice. Either a flat $5,000 or 40% of the sale of certain assets. So it gets complicated from there. But basically you have a choice, 5,000 or 40%. So Vermont is already reducing capital gains a little bit. My read on this is partly to make up for the fact that we don't have a lower rate like the Feds do for a long term.
Okay, it just goes in, so but it gets counted at a lower it's an income tax. It'd be tapped at a lower rate if you were lower income. It would be a higher rate if you were in the top bracket and had higher income.
And that's another good point about this, is if you're excluding that amount, it's possible that that extra amount would have put someone to a higher bracket in Vermont. So that amount you're excluding would have been taxed at a higher rate also in a lot of cases than the rest of their income because of our marginal brackets.
Okay, yeah. What do other states do?
For sales of farms,
Yeah,
I don't know if this exists elsewhere. I can look into it though.
okay, that would be helpful. I mean, there's lots of agricultural states that would like to help agriculture.
I'm sorry if I'm. Just saying this correctly. As we talked about last time, Madam Chair, farms are businesses. So is there a similar thing for sale of other businesses to family members?
That exists for Vermont?
Yeah. So, okay, so if you had a restaurant or a grocery store or whatever that you sold to your son, you would still have to pay capital gains for whatever you made on that.
Yes, except you possibly might be able to use that 40% exclusion that Vermont already has.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's what I missed you saying. I heard
Yes.
so there's an existing 40% for the first 40% of capital gains that you.
For all of your capital gains, you could possibly exclude 40%. It's just there's a lot of caveats in there for it's only certain types of assets.
But that makes up for the fact that our capital gains
Are
the top
taxed at
60%
the regular
are
tax rate.
taxed at the regular tax rate, not at the federal lower tax rate. I remember playing with the estate tax in the feds for a long time. I don't remember playing.
The capital gains exclusion for Vermont has been the way it has since I started doing this stuff about 12 years ago.
Yeah. Go back a lot. Right?
Like about 12 years ago. it hasn't really
Was a really big one. As we used to be much more tightly coupled with the feds. Okay. Why don't we have Senator Ingalls share what the thinking of his committee is? Then.
Do you need me for anything else?
Not if you're somewhere else to be.
I'll be that.
Okay. I'm not sure we completely understand what's going on, so it might be helpful if someone keep an eye on this.
Senator Russ Ingalls, Chair of Senate Agriculture. Thank you. First time in this committee. Glad to be here.
That's right. Okay.
Um,
We're terrible. You know it.
that's the only one here said that. Your reputation precedes you, Madam Chair. I think you're okay. So this was part of trying to help out Senate Economic Resource their S 118 bill. And this came to us from Senator Keisha Long. And as far as some of this, so we were just trying to, as you are aware of, there are bills that towards the end of the session that you're using to travel with. And this was one of them. We knew going into this that it was late in the season and then probably, I mean, we always want to advocate for a bill, right? But we knew that this might be a little bit too late and it might need some more thinking as far as to try to get this through. So there's a reason why it's on the end of the bill.
Okay, so this is the whole tax exclusion, and this wasn't originally part of the bill.
Right.
It was
It was part of
another
S
bill,
one
part of
eighteen.
another bill.
That's right.
Moving around.
Exactly right. And so there's a reason why it's on the end of the bill. And we knew coming in late, well, yeah, so,
We need to
yeah,
do that.
yeah, so that's where it's at, to be
Okay.
fair with that. So,
Okay,
and we can take it up, I'm sure that, they can take, we can, they can take another look at it when we have more time on the coming up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
This is something I like just the tour, but I also don't know, I feel like there are other implications and things that we need to work out, and I'm wondering if we could wait till next year to really go through it a little bit more.
We were kind of fully expecting that if we would have another month before that, but again, we were trying to keep this bill open as long as we could because there was some other types of attachments that could have possibly happened, and we got to it late. We knew that this might be a casualty of what we were doing, so yeah.
okay, great. And the rest of the bill is,
Rest of the bill, I think, was pretty solid and straightforward. We're hoping that you see it the same way, and
I
but
don't think there's much in it for us in the rest of the bill.
well,
That's
I don't
probably
think.
why it's here.
Well, exactly. What's that word? De minimis?
De minimis. It's our favorite word.
Yeah, so,
Well, we're gonna hear from James and he'll tell us if it's de minimis. Okay, thank you.
so thank you.
That I think might make our job easier. James, you wanna,
Sure thing.
something tells me this may not have the D word attached to it.
Yeah,
Parts of it,
Parts of
like
it.
we do. The James Duffy Joint Fiscal Office. We did a little bit of drive-by on this bill in this committee last week already. So Madam Chair, I'll defer to you how much. you
That's
would like
right.
to
There
hear
was a
again.
section you didn't. Yeah.
That's right. So last week we did discuss the registration requirements for beneficial agricultural substances. This is anticipated to be de minimis effect on AAFM's annual fee revenue. It's creating a new definition for products that are already required to be registered every year. But they might currently be considered fertilizers, for example. This is creating a new category called beneficial substances, which would mostly capture
Yes.
all of those products that are already registered. And so it is anticipated that it would dramatically increase the fee revenue received by AAFM or increase the fee or the amount of fees paid by anybody, by any fee payers currently. Sections 2 and 3 create a new pesticide registration fee. Currently, all pesticides sold in the state of Vermont must be registered with AAFM annually. And registrants pay a $200 fee to do so. $185 of that goes to the Pesticide Monitoring Special Fund. 15 of that goes to the Ag Quality Special Fund. This section would impose $50 fee in addition to that on that same universe of fee payers. And the purpose of that fee would be to cover the costs of obsolete pesticide collection and disposal incurred by solid waste management districts. Currently, AAFM covers the cost or helps to cover the costs that's incurred by those waste management districts in disposing of obsolete unwanted pesticides. But in recent years, those funds have been insufficient to cover the costs that they're
This is
incurring.
similar to what we did with paint. Yes.
It touches on similar things regarding extended producer responsibilities. Yeah.
Say what's out there. My daughter worked for the extension and they went into an old farm shed and found bags of BDT still laying around. Holy cow. They've been there a while.
Well, this section is.
Somebody's got to get rid of them.
Exactly. And so up and until there is or the decision is made to establish an extended producer responsibility program specifically for pesticides in the state of Vermont, currently there is not one. This would be intended to cover the costs of that disposal. Section 3 would also direct the Secretary of AAFM with the Commissioner of the DEC to study potential funding sources for this work, including potentially an EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Program. They would report back to the General Assembly by December 15th, 2025 to the committees of jurisdiction this coming winter on an EPR or other revenue sources for this work. And just to give a number to that, we estimate that this would raise $613,000 approximately for the pesticide monitoring special fund in fiscal year 26 and for subsequent fiscal years. The amount of money that these registrations raise every year has been quite consistent for the last fiscal year. So I would expect about 615 to be the number going forward. So that gets us into sections 5 and 6, which are tax provisions of the bill, which we discussed in less detail when we talked about this bill last week. Joint fiscal was still in particular looking at section 6 to try and put a cost estimate for foregone tax revenue for that net capital gains exclusion from Vermont income for the sale of farm real estate. So we'll just take them in order here. Section 5 would pertain to the use value appraisal program. So currently, agricultural, there exists in statute a definition for agricultural land that is eligible to enroll in use value appraisal. Under current law, one of the criteria that can be used to qualify agricultural land for UVA, use value appraisal, is related to how much annual gross income your farm sells in farm produce in a given period of years, as well as what the size of your farm is. So if you are agricultural land parcel of 25 acres or less, and you sold at least $2,000 in gross annual income from crops in one of the last 2 or 3 of the last 5 years, you qualify for use value appraisal, for example. What this section would do is allow you to also consider the equivalent value of donated crops, not just crops that you sold, but crops that you donated to qualify for use value appraisal eligibility. So let's say I'm someone who donated $2,000. I didn't sell any of it, but I'm donating it to my local food bank. I would be able to consider that towards my eligibility for UVA. This one is difficult to estimate exactly because it really, the cost in terms of foregone property tax revenue depends on to what extent this provision would induce more people to have eligible parcels for a use value appraisal, right? To what extent would this induce more people to donate agricultural produce beyond this $2,000 threshold if they aren't doing so already? In being familiar with UVA, I think the universe of people that this would bring into UVA that aren't currently qualifying is likely quite small. But if you are having tax department in tomorrow to discuss any elements of this bill, they might have some implementation considerations for this in terms of how they would track the value of donations as opposed to the value of sales, right? There might be some wrinkles there. But really the physical impact of this depends on the extent to which it brings more people under the UVA eligibility banner.
I guess I was wondering too, there are leaders who go out there and after you've harvested your crop, if you left some bruised pumpkins or things you missed, who sets the value on those? I guess that's what questions of the tax department. No?
I was just gonna say, if you have 25 acres of pumpkins, you're gonna exceed the $2,000 threshold in sales
Anyway,
real quickly.
okay. True, thinking about what I paid for a pumpkin last year. Okay,
And I agree. So that's why the sense of this one is that it's probably relatively small. Like that marginal number of people who
you're
bring
gonna
it.
start out and try and get into use value, donating $2,000 worth of vegetables. Okay. So that one's sounds okay, but we'll ask the tax department.
They might have some thoughts. I'm not sure. And then section 6 of the bill deals with an additional exemption from the definition of state income tax for net farm profit up to $10,000 if you are a tax filer who had $10,000 or less in net farm profit that year. So if I'm a filer and I have up to $10,000 in net farm profit, I can exempt that first $10,000 in net farm profit. If I am filing and I have $12,000 in net farm profit, this does not apply to me for that tax year. JFO worked with tax to cost this provision out. Our estimate is that this would cost the state approximately $200,000 in foregone tax revenue in tax year 26. Our legislative council did mention previously that there isn't currently an appropriation or rather these tax expenditures are not built into
They're not
the
in this year's budget.
in the fiscal year 26 budget construct. So I want to note that up front. And so for this one and the next one that we'll discuss, they weren't considered in the fiscal year 26 budget construct. But that is the estimated annual cost for tax year 26. And then the last piece of the fiscal note estimates the cost for that net capital gain income exemption that you heard Kirby talk about just before. So this provision of the bill would exempt from the definition of taxable Vermont state income net adjusted capital gains from the sale of farm real estate, farm operation real estate, if I sell that farm operation real estate to either a relative or a farm employee of 10 years or more. To my knowledge and to the tax department's knowledge, there isn't a data set out there that allows us to cost out the potential foregone tax revenue from the transfer of property to long-time farm employees. I don't know where that data comes from. But we were able to use, the property transfer tax data does property transferences to family members. So using that data, we were able to put together a rough estimate. This gets complicated because, as we've discussed with Kirby, this income is thrown onto the pile of other, ordinary taxable income in Vermont. It's not a tax at its own special rate, right? So the cost of this provision would depend on each individual taxpayer's marginal tax rate, as well as whether reducing or deducting this income would bring them into a lower tax bracket. That is information that is not crosswalked with property transfer tax data. And so that's an analytical constraint on this estimate, right? We can't walk the PGT data over to what those property sellers' income tax data was to really do a more granular estimate. But using the property transfer tax data, we estimate that in fiscal year 26, this provision would have cost the state approximately $500,000 in foregone revenue.
Okay, but if we had a year in which a lot of farms changed hands during the last recession, I know Vita was staggering the tax so that they didn't glut the market in milk cows and depress the prices any more than they were. So we do have economic times when a lot of farms get sold, sometimes to family members. Okay, we will hear from tax. I'm concerned about precedent of start saying some real estate sales to some people are tax exempt, but real estate. I think the gleaning is the donation, if you're giving it to your local food bank, that's fine, we're going the income.
And I think Michael's point too, that if you have 25 acres worth of crops that you're harvesting, whether they don't, you're likely to be getting that threshold already, regardless of whether it's sold or donated. One other note, this is mostly moot because there isn't accounted for. These tax provisions are accounted for in the fiscal year budget contract, but I will note that the effective date for these tax provisions, along with the rest of the bill, is July 1st of 2025.
So the money that we're anticipating getting from these tax exemptions is already in the budget. So if we decide to do it, we would have to extend to 26, at least another year.
The effective date. That could be one way of dealing with that, yes.
Or just.
And then tax might be able to speak more to the implementation considerations that would go along with a July 1st, 2025 effective date. But I did want to flag that.
We've got cannabis tomorrow. We may end up being here a little late. I'll try and do this. I'm working on the assumption that they're going to work something out and some education bill will be on the floor tomorrow, which means if we get out in time to do this committee at 1 o'clock, bringing our lunch, we're probably gonna be lucky. But we'll try and get tax over here. Just to get their input, and then we can decide what we want to do with this, but the rest of the bill really needs to go. Is that again another stop when it leaves here, do you know?
I think you're the final stop, Madam
With the
Chair.
final stop,
Yep.
okay. So we'll try and get that out of here tomorrow.
The short, yes, sorry, I was thinking of a bill that would go to Senate appropriations.
Join the club.
H 479.
No, actually, so
This-
the remember when I last.
We're
did this
all
committee,
getting
though, H230.
mixed up with that one. Okay. Thank you, everyone. That finishes up what we've got today.
Is Tucker coming back with a berry?
Tucker should be coming back with the Barry amendment, which we could put on and then vote out the other bill. Can you, Rob, just see what his time frame is? I can give the committee a break and we can come back and vote that one out.
I forgot to just get out of here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for talking.
I think
Thank you, Madam Chair.